The escape pod had no window. Commander Vexeles of the Galactic Alliance pressed her forehead against the cold metal hull, pretending she could see through it. Outside, the void stretched infinite and indifferent. Her ship, her command, her home for 11 cycles, had wrenched itself into FTL 17 minutes ago. The quantum wake had nearly torn the pod apart. She was still alive, that was the cruel part. Oxygen at 34%, the pod's voice announced. Calm, mechanical, utterly unaware that it was reciting her death warrant. Vex opened her eyes. The pod was small enough to trigger claustrophobia in species half her size. She was Vethari, lean, gray-skinned, with eyes adapted for low-light environments. Her kind didn't panic in tight spaces. They'd evolved in burrow cities beneath frozen moons, but even burrows had exits, even burrows had hope. This metal coffin had neither. She pulled up the ship's log on her wrist terminal. The last entry was fragmented, corrupted by the jump's radiation, but she'd memorized every word before the pod system started failing. Commander Vexeles, you are hereby relieved of duty. Charges, insubordination, treason, endangerment of Alliance assets. The Council has reviewed your refusal to abandon Outpost Theta 9 during the Catharn incursion. Your decision to evacuate noncombatants cost the Alliance a strategic resource. You will be placed in administrative detention pending. The transmission had cut off when the mutiny began, not against her, for her. Her first officer, Jax, a crusty old Xylith who'd served 3 decades, had stormed the bridge. She'd watched through the security feed as he tried to stop them, watched them stun him, watched them drag her from the command chair. She hadn't fought, that was the shame she'd carry into whatever came next. I will now recite emergency protocols, the pod said. No, Vex whispered, don't bother. But the pod continued, listing escape vectors and rescue probabilities. The word rescue appeared 12 times. Each time the probability dropped. By the final mention, the number had settled at 0.3%. Not zero. She almost laughed, almost. The Alliance had abandoned her in deep space, outside standard shipping lanes, outside patrol routes, outside Mercy. They'd launched the pod on a ballistic trajectory toward nowhere. No transponder, no distress beacon strong enough to reach Alliance space. Just her, 34% oxygen, and enough nutrient paste to keep her alive until the air ran out. 87 hours if she conserved. She could make it 90 by slowing her breathing. 90 hours to think about what she'd done wrong. 90 hours to replay the Council's faces, cold, reptilian, utterly convinced of their own righteousness. Outpost Theta 9 had held 3,000 civilians, children. Her own niece had been among them. The Catharn were coming, and the Alliance had ordered an orbital bombardment, scorched asteroid, deny the enemy a foothold. 3,000 lives traded for tactical advantage. Vex had said no. She'd launched every shuttle, every cargo hauler, every vessel with an atmosphere seal. She'd packed them with civilians and watched them flee. Then she turned her guns on the Catharn and held the line for 6 hours. They'd won, the outpost still stood, the civilians were alive. And the Council had branded her a traitor. Oxygen at 31%. She recorded her final log, not for the Alliance, they'd delete it, for herself, for the void if it cared to listen. This is Commander Vexeles, Vethari Defense Corps, Registry voided. I am adrift in Sector 9, no hope of rescue. I do not regret my actions. I regret only that I failed to save more. If any being finds this recording, tell them I died standing for something. She closed the log and waited for the dark. Then the pod's passive sensors chirped. Vex's eyes snapped to the display. A heat signature, massive, moving on an intercept course. Not Alliance. Alliance ships ran cold, stealth-coated, invisible until they wanted to be seen. This vessel blazed like a star, like it wanted everyone in the sector to know exactly where it was. Like it didn't care. Her translation matrix struggled with the identification. The ship's configuration was wrong, blocky, inefficient, the kind of design a child would draw. Then the matrix found a match. Human. Vex's blood went cold for an entirely different reason. The Death Worlders, the ones who'd crawled out of a gravity well that should have crushed them. The ones who'd weaponized their own biochemistry, their own aggression, their own stubborn refusal to die. Humans weren't part of the Alliance. Humans weren't part of anything. They were newcomers, barely a century into space, and every civilized species had learned the same lesson: do not provoke them. And now one of their ships was heading straight for her. The pod's comm crackled. A voice broke through, harsh, guttural, shaped by a throat that breathed poison. Unknown pod, this is the human vessel Last Chance. We have you on sensors. Do you require assistance? Vex stared at the display. The humans had found her. And the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you abandoned one soul to die alone. Vex didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat had closed around something that felt like hope, and hope was more dangerous than vacuum. The human ship grew on her sensors, a bloated, asymmetrical thing held together by what looked like rivets in desperation. Its drive signature flickered like a dying candle, yet it moved with purpose, with hunger. Unknown pod, this is your second hail. The human's voice was female, calm in a way that made Vex's scales tighten. We're reading life signs, one occupant, low biomass. You're not going to make it another 60 hours out here. My engineer says your power core is leaking. The pod was leaking, Vex had known. She'd chosen not to mention it to herself. My name is Captain Alara Vance of the independent vessel Last Chance. A pause, static crackled. I'm going to be real with you, friend. We're not Alliance, we're not anything official. But we have air, we have water, and we have a medic who's only caused 2 deaths this month. That's a better deal than you've got right now. Vex's translator struggled with the cadence. The humor was the human, joking about death. She forced herself to speak. Her voice came out shattered. This is Commander Vexeles. My pod has been compromised. I am, she stopped. What was she? Relieved of duty, condemned, forgotten. I am in need of rescue. Silence, 5 seconds that felt like drowning. Then the human said, yeah, we figured, and the ship changed course. Vex watched in disbelief as the Last Chance rotated its bulk, exposing a docking collar that looked welded on as an afterthought. The ship wasn't just ugly, it was wrong. Pipes ran along the exterior, patched with what appeared to be literal tape. Cargo containers were strapped to the hull with cables. One entire section looked like it had been replaced with a different color metal, scavenged from somewhere else. This wasn't a warship, this wasn't even a proper freighter. This was a floating disaster. And it was coming to save her. Approaching for docking, the captain said. Your pod's magnetic clamps are shot, so this is going to be enthusiastic brace. Vex grabbed the restraints. She had just enough time to think these people are insane before impact threw her against the harness. Metal screamed, the pod shuddered like a dying animal. Then, with a clang that echoed through her bones, the docking collar sealed. Air hissed. Not her air, their air. It flooded the pod in a warm, chemical wave. She tasted hydrocarbons, recycled water vapor, and something else, something organic, humans, dozens of them, breathing the same atmosphere, sweating, living, existing in a space that should have been sterile. The inner hatch cycled. Vex drew her sidearm, a ceremonial weapon, barely lethal. She pointed it at the door. The door opened. 3 humans stood on the other side. The leader was a female, shorter than Vex but broader, with dark skin and close-cropped hair. Scars crossed her face like battle maps. Her eyes were the color of rust, and they held no fear of the gun pointed at her chest. Behind her, 2 males, both large, both armed with kinetic weapons that fired projectiles rather than energy. Primitive, brutal, effective. The female raised empty hands. I'm Captain Vance, she said. You're pointing that thing at me, Commander. I'm going to assume it's because you're scared, not stupid. Vex's arm trembled. She'd faced Catharn boarding parties. She'd walked through fire and enemy lines. But she had never, in all her cycles, faced a creature that looked at a weapon and simply didn't care. Humans are not authorized in this sector, Vex managed. Vance smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Funny, the Alliance said the same thing when we pulled 6 of their pilots out of a debris field last year. She stepped forward. The gun barrel touched her chest. She didn't stop. They also said we couldn't have salvage rights. Then they said we couldn't dock at their stations. Then they said we didn't exist. She reached past the gun and placed a hand on Vex's shoulder. Her palm was warm, shockingly warm. But we exist, Commander. We exist everywhere the Alliance doesn't want us to be. And right now, we exist right here. Her grip tightened. You're coming with us. You're going to eat something. You're going to drink something that isn't recycled. And then you're going to tell me who left you to die. Vex lowered the gun. The humans didn't smile. They didn't celebrate. They simply turned and walked back into their ship, as if rescuing a condemned alien from the void was just another Tuesday. Vex followed. She stepped through the hatch and into a corridor that smelled of engine grease, cooked protein, and something burning. Alarms chirped in the distance. A voice yelled about a coolant leak. Somewhere, someone was laughing. The hatch closed behind her. The last chance accelerated. And in the empty space where her pod still drifted, the oxygen meter ticked down to 28%. No one was there to watch it die. The last chance had no business being spaceworthy. Vex learned this within the first 30 seconds of boarding. The corridor walls were covered in handwritten notes, maintenance schedules, weapon inventories, and what appeared to be a crude drawing of a human male with an arrow pointing to text that translated as STV, do not feed after midnight. The air was thick, not with toxins, her environmental sensors would have warned her, but with life. The Vethari kept their ships sterile, recycled, purified. Humans apparently preferred their atmosphere seasoned with body heat, cooking smells, and the faint musk of exhausted exertion. "Keep moving," said one of the armed males behind her. He had a beard that defied regulation and a patch over one eye. "Captain doesn't like waiting." Vex walked, her legs shook. She hadn't realized how weak she'd become, only hours since the mutiny, but stress had burned through her reserves like acid. The humans matched her pace without comment. They didn't rush her. They didn't carry her. They simply waited. The bridge was a disaster. Vex stepped through the doors and stopped. Cables hung from the ceiling like dead vines. Consoles had been jury-rigged with components from at least 6 different species, none of them compatible. A hole in the bulkhead had been patched with what looked like armor plate from a Catharn cruiser. She recognized the alloy, and sealed with something that was definitely not rated for vacuum. And yet the ship flew. Captain Vance stood at the center of the chaos, arms crossed, watching Vex with those rust-colored eyes. First time on a human vessel. "I've seen hive nests with better organization." Vance laughed. It was a real laugh, not the polite dismissal Vex expected. "Yeah, that's fair. This ship is a piece of shit. She's also the only home I've got." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. You look like you're about to fall over." Vex didn't sit. "Why did you rescue me?" "Because you were there." "That's not." "It's the only reason that matters." Vance walked to a console and tapped a display. An image appeared. Vex's pod, small and cold against the stars. "Passive sensors picked up your heat signature 6 hours ago. We were on our way to a salvage site. Changed course." "You changed course for a random distress signal." "We changed course for a distress signal that shouldn't exist." Vance turned. Her face had changed. The humor was gone. "Your Alliance, Commander. Alliance ships don't launch escape pods without filing flight plans. Alliance officers don't get dumped in deep space without a transponder. So when we saw you out here alone dying," she stepped closer, "we figured someone wanted you dead, and we've got a soft spot for people who have made powerful enemies." Vex's throat tightened. "You don't know me." "I know you're still breathing. That's enough for now." A door hissed open. A new human entered, female, younger than Vance, with medical symbols on her stained jacket. She carried a scanner that looked cobbled together from spare parts. "Captain, the alien's vitals are a mess. Dehydration, malnutrition, stress hormones off the scale. She needs rest and fluids." The medic glanced at Vex. "Also, I've never treated a Vethari before, so if she turns purple and dies, that's not on me." "She's not going to die," Vance said. "You don't know that." "I know she survived this long, that's enough." Vance turned back to Vex. "Here's how this works. You're going with the medic. You're going to let her poke and prod you. You're going to eat and drink and sleep. And when you wake up, you're going to tell us exactly what happened." "And if I refuse?" Vance smiled again. This time it reached her eyes. "Then you can go back to your pod, but I should warn you we're moving, and we're not turning around." The ship shuddered, the engines growled, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through Vex's bones. They were already underway, already committed. She had no pod to return to, no Alliance to save her. No name, no rank, no future. She had nothing. And yet, when the medic reached out a hand, Vex took it. The infirmary was smaller than her old quarters. The bed was too short for her legs. The pillow smelled like someone else's sweat. But when she closed her eyes, the ship's heartbeat thrummed through the walls, irregular, strained, alive. She dreamed of her niece, of Theta 9, of the faces of the council as they pronounced her dead. She woke screaming. And someone was there. Captain Vance sat in a chair beside the bed, cleaning a pistol with methodical precision. She didn't flinch at Vex's scream, didn't look up. "Bad dreams," she said, not a question. Vex clutched the blanket. "Why are you here?" "Because someone has to be," Vance set down the pistol. "Because I know what it's like to wake up in a strange place and not know if you're safe." She met Vex's eyes. "You're safe here, Commander, for what that's worth." Vex's translator struggled with the next question. "Why do you care?" Vance stood. She walked to the door, then paused. "Because 7 years ago I was in your position, dying in a pod, betrayed by people I trusted, and some strangers in a beat-up ship pulled me out of the dark." She looked back. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't ask for gratitude. They just said, "Hold on." "So that's what I'm telling you, Commander." Her voice dropped. "Hold on, because whatever you did to make the Alliance leave you for dead, I've got a feeling we're going to like you." The door closed. Vex lay in the darkness, listening to the ship groan around her. For the first time in 90 hours, she wasn't alone. And somewhere in the void behind them, the Alliance fleet was about to receive a very unpleasant surprise. The mess hall was Vex's first real test. She'd avoided it for 2 days, eating nutrient bars in her quarters while the crew whispered outside her door. But hunger had become a blade between her ribs and the nutrient bars were gone, so she walked. 12 humans looked up as she entered. Vex froze, 12 sets of eyes, brown, blue, green, gray, all fixed on her with an intensity that made her want to crawl back into the ventilation shaft she'd been using as a shortcut. The mess hall was small, cramped, built for half this many bodies. Humans sat on crates, on the floor, on a bench that had been welded to the wall at a slightly wrong angle. They ate from mismatched bowls with utensils that didn't match. No one spoke. Then a male near the food dispenser shrugged. "Aliens gotta eat," he gestured to a pot. "Protein stew, it's not poison, probably." Someone laughed, the tension cracked. Humans went back to their meals, stealing glances but no longer starring. Vex walked to the dispenser on legs that felt like borrowed time. The stew was gray, it smelled like regret. She ate it anyway. Captain Vance found her an hour later, sitting alone in a maintenance alcove, staring at her empty bowl. "How was dinner?" Vex didn't look up. "Your species cooks food until it loses all nutritional value." "Yeah, but it tastes good." Vance sat across from her, folding her legs in a way that looked impossible. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About who left you to die." Vex set down the bowl. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. "The Alliance Council, 7 members. They ordered me to abandon a civilian outpost to the Catharn. I refused. I evacuated the civilians. I held the line, and when it was over, they stripped my command and launched me into space." Vance's expression didn't change. The Catharn, bug monsters, right? 6 legs, no sense of humor. "They are a hive-minded species, expansionist, brutal. And you fought them off with 1 ship." "I had the advantage of terrain." Vex paused in desperation. Vance nodded slowly. She pulled a data pad from her jacket and tapped it. An image appeared, the Alliance Council chamber, all 7 members in session. Vex's stomach turned. "Recognize them." "Everyone." "Good." Vance stood. "Because we're going back." Vex's translator glitched. She thought she'd misheard. "What?" "We're going back to Alliance space, to the outpost, to the Council." Vance's voice was flat, final. "You're going to stand in front of them and tell the galaxy what they did. That's suicide. The last chance is barely operational. The Alliance fleet will." "The Alliance fleet won't see us coming." Vex stood. Her height gave her an advantage over the human, but Vance didn't back down, didn't blink. "You don't understand," Vex said. "The Council has already declared me dead. They've probably filed the paperwork. If I show up alive, they'll just finish the job." "Probably." Then why? Because I'm not asking you to do it alone. Vance stepped closer. Her voice dropped to something almost gentle. Commander, my crew and I are exiles. Every single one of us was left behind by someone who was supposed to protect us. We've been scavenging, running, hiding, because we didn't have a ship that could fight back. She gestured around her, at the patchwork walls, the failing systems, the desperate, beautiful chaos of a ship that had no right to fly. But we've got something better than a warship. We've got something the Alliance doesn't understand. What? Vance smiled. We've got nothing left to lose. The words hit Vex like a physical blow. She thought of her crew, Jax, stunned and bleeding on the bridge, her niece, safe on Theta 9 but forever marked by what she'd survived, the 3,000 civilians who owed their lives to a woman the Council had erased. She thought of the pod, the oxygen ticking down, the silence. And then she thought of the last chance, the human voice that had broken through the dark. We read you, alien, hold on. I need to see the ship, Vex said. All of it, the weapons, the engines, everything you're hiding. Vance raised an eyebrow. You think we're hiding something? I think no species sends a ship this broken into deep space unless they have a reason. I think you didn't just stumble across my pod by accident. And I think, Vex said, her voice hardening, that you've been looking for a fight for a very long time. Silence. Then Vance laughed, not mockery, but recognition, the sound of two predators finding common ground. Follow me. The tour took 2 hours. Vex saw the engine room, where a human engineer named Gregor had strapped a reactor from 3 different ships together and called it mostly stable. She saw the cargo bay, converted into a makeshift armory, filled with weapons salvaged from a dozen species. She saw the bridge, where navigation charts mapped Alliance patrol routes with obsessive precision. And she saw the crew. 47 humans, 47 stories. Some were veterans, scarred by wars the galaxy had forgotten. Some were children, actual children, born on ships like this one, who had never known solid ground. All of them looked at Vex with the same expression. Not fear, not hostility. Hope. They're looking at me like I'm an answer, Vex said quietly. Vance stood beside her at the observation window. Outside, the stars stretched endless and cold. They're looking at you because you're the first Alliance officer who ever chose civilians over orders. Vance turned. Do you know how rare that is? How many humans have been sacrificed because some bureaucrat decided they were expendable? I didn't save humans. No, you saved your own people, and that's even rarer. Vance's jaw tightened. The Alliance doesn't care about anyone, not the Vethari, not the Xylith, not the humans dying in refugee camps on the edge of their territory. They care about resources and strategic advantages, and they left you to die because you reminded them that lives aren't resources. Vex stared at the stars, at her own reflection, faint and gray, superimposed over infinity. What do you want from me? Nothing you're not ready to give, Vance stepped back. The course is set. We're 37 hours from Alliance space. You have until then to decide. Decide what? Vance smiled. It was the first genuine smile Vex had seen on a human face, warm, sad, and utterly terrifying. Decide who you are now, Alliance Commander Vexeles, loyal daughter of the Vethari, or the woman who chose to save 3,000 lives and got thrown away for it. She left. Vex stood alone at the window, watching the stars bleed past. Somewhere ahead the Alliance waited, her accusers, her executioners. And somewhere behind her, 47 humans held their breath, waiting to see if she would fight. Or if she would run. The last chance surged forward, engines screaming, carrying its impossible cargo toward war. Vex closed her eyes. And for the first time, she smiled. The last chance dropped out of FTL 17 light seconds from outpost Theta 9. Vex stood on the bridge, gripping a handrail so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The display showed the outpost, rebuilt, reinforced, bristling with weapons. Alliance banners flew from every antenna, and orbiting above it, 3 warships. Corvettes, fast, agile, designed to hunt pirates and enforce blockades. Against the last chance, they might as well have been dreadnoughts. 3 hostiles, Gregor reported from the engineering station. His voice crackled over the bridge speakers. Captain, my reactor is held together with hope and spite. One good hit and we're a firework. Vance didn't flinch. How far to the outpost's comm relay? 12 light seconds. We can broadcast from here, but the signal will take. I know how long it takes. Vance turned to Vex. You have your speech. Vex patted the data slate in her pocket. 37 hours of writing. 37 hours of remembering every face she'd failed and every life she'd saved. I have it. Good, because we're only going to get one shot. Vance raised her voice. All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. If you have a weapon, you carry it. If you have a prayer, you say it. We are not here to fight the Alliance. We are here to make them listen. The crew moved, not with panic, with purpose. Humans flowed through the corridors like blood through veins, fast and necessary. Vex watched them arm themselves, check systems, whisper to each other in languages her translator couldn't catch. She'd never seen anything like it. Commander, a voice at her elbow, the medic from before, young, nervous, holding a bundle of fabric. Captain said you should wear this. Vex unfolded the bundle, black armor, human-made, sized for her frame. It was lighter than Alliance issue, but the material felt strange beneath her fingers, flexible, strong. What is this? Body armor. We had to cut it down from Gregor's spare set. He's bigger than you. The medic paused. Also, there's a gun in the left pocket. Don't shoot yourself. Vex stared at the armor, at the gun, at the young human who was trying very hard not to shake. Why are you doing this? The medic blinked. Doing what? Fighting for me. You don't know me. I'm not your species. I'm not even from your sector of space. Vex's voice cracked. You should have left me in that pod. The medic was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out and touched Vex's arm. Her hand was warm. Of course it was. Because my father was a soldier, the medic said quietly. He served in the Alliance peacekeeping force. Did you know humans aren't allowed to be officers? We're only good for ground ops, cannon fodder. That's what they told him. Vex didn't know. She'd never asked. When he was wounded, they left him on a transport with no medical support. By the time we got to him, he was already gone. The medic's jaw tightened. The Alliance didn't kill him. They just didn't save him. And that's the same thing, isn't it? Vex had no answer. So when Captain Vance said we were going to pull some alien out of the dark, I said yes, because someone should have said yes to my father. The medic stepped back. Now put on the armor. You've got a galaxy to yell at. Vex dressed. The armor fit perfectly. The gun was heavier than she expected. When she walked onto the bridge, every human turned to look. Vance nodded once, sharply. Suits you. I feel like I'm wearing a dead person. You are. Vance's expression didn't change. Gregor's cousin, he'd be honored. She turned to the comm station. Open a channel, broadcast on all Alliance frequencies, encryption be damned. The comm officer's hands flew across the console. Channel open. Vex stepped forward, her heart hammered, her mouth was dry. She thought of the pod, the oxygen ticking down, the silence. And she spoke. This is Commander Vexeles of the Vethari Defense Corps, registry voided by order of the Alliance Council. I am alive. I am broadcasting from the independent human vessel Last Chance, and I am here to tell you what the Council did to me. She paused, let the words sink in. 37 days ago, I was ordered to abandon Outpost Theta 9 to the Catharn incursion. 3,000 civilians, including children, including my own niece, were marked for death. The Alliance called it a strategic sacrifice. I called it murder. Her voice grew stronger. I refused the order. I evacuated the civilians. I held the line with one ship against a Catharn advance. And when it was over, when the outpost was safe and the people were alive, the Council relieved me of duty. They charged me with treason, and they launched me into deep space in an escape pod with a failing power core and no transponder. On the display, she could see the Alliance ships changing course, moving to intercept. She had minutes, maybe less. But she kept talking. I recorded a final log. I said goodbye to the stars, and then a human vessel broke the silence. They pulled me from the dark. They fed me. They armed me. They asked nothing in return except the truth. Vex stepped closer to the camera. So here is the truth. The Alliance Council is afraid, not of the Catharn, not of the humans. They're afraid of anyone who refuses to treat lives as disposable. They left me to die because I reminded them that mercy still exists in this galaxy. She raised her chin. I am coming home not to beg, not to apologize. I am coming to stand before the council and the galaxy and demand justice for every soldier, every civilian, every soul they've ever thrown away. The humans are with me, and if you're listening, if you've ever been left behind, you can be with me too. The transmission ended. Silence on the bridge. Then Vance said, incoming message from the light corvette. Vex's blood went cold, put it through. The display flickered, a face appeared, Alliance Commander Tivoth, a Xylith male with cold eyes and a colder smile. Vex had served under him once, she'd hated him then, she hated him more now. Commander Vexeles, his voice dripped with false courtesy. We received your broadcast. The Council is very interested in speaking with you. I'm sure they are. However, your human companions are not welcome in Alliance space. You will transfer to our vessel alone. Your human ship will depart immediately, or we will open fire. Vance stepped into frame. Her scarred face filled the display. Commander Tivoth, I'm Captain Alara Vance of the Last Chance, and I've got a counteroffer. Tivoth's eyes narrowed. Humans have no authority to. Let me stop you there, Vance smiled. It was the smile of a predator. My ship is old, it's broken, it's held together with tape and bad decisions. But it's also carrying enough explosive yield to turn your 3 corvettes into confetti. I jury-rigged the reactor myself. If you fire on us, we'll detonate, and we'll take you with us. Tivoth's face went gray. You're bluffing. Am I? Vance tilted her head. You've never met a human before, have you? Let me explain something. We don't bluff, we don't negotiate, we survive. And right now, the only way I survive is if Commander Vexeles walks onto that outpost with her head held high and her crew at her back. She leaned closer to the camera. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to clear a landing pad. You're going to let us dock. And then you're going to watch while the woman you left to die walks through your doors and tells the galaxy exactly what you are. Tivoth's mouth opened, closed, opened again. You're insane. No, Vance straightened. I'm human. There's a difference. She cut the channel. The bridge erupted. Humans cheered, hugged, pounded each other on the back. Vex stood frozen, watching the Alliance corvettes drift on the display. They weren't firing. They weren't moving. They were waiting. Vance turned to her. Well, Commander, ready to go home. Vex touched the gun in her pocket, the armor on her chest, the weight of 47 humans who had chosen to die for a stranger. I was never home, she said, not until now. The Last Chance sailed toward the outpost. And behind them, the Alliance fleet received the broadcast. Across the galaxy, people began to listen. The docking bay was a cathedral of tension. Vex walked down the Last Chance's boarding ramp with Vance at her right and Gregor at her left. 44 other humans fanned out behind them, not in formation, not in any military order Vex recognized, but in a loose cluster of overlapping fields of fire. They drilled this for hours. The Alliance had tactics. The humans had chaos. Chaos, it turned out, was harder to predict. Alliance security waited on the bay floor. 20 officers in full combat gear, pulse rifles raised, visors down. They looked like statues, perfect, immobile, conditioned to follow orders without question. Vex knew their type. She'd commanded them once. The lead officer stepped forward, a Vethari male, young, with eyes that widened when he saw her face. Commander Vexeles, you are ordered to surrender your weapons and accompany us too. No. The word came out flat, final. The officer blinked. Commander, I have my orders. And I have 47 humans who crossed 18 light years of hostile space to stand beside me. Vex didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You have 20 officers who were told to detain a traitor, but they're looking at me right now, and they're wondering why a traitor has friends. The officer's visor hid his expression, but his gun hand trembled. Vex took a step forward. I'm not here to fight you. I'm not here to start a war. I'm here to walk onto that council floor and speak the truth. If you shoot me, you'll have to shoot every human behind me, and if you shoot them, she paused, let the silence stretch. Their ship's reactor is set to detonate in 45 minutes. The captain rigged it herself. She's very good at her job. Behind her, Vance didn't react, didn't confirm or deny. That was the trick. Uncertainty was sharper than any blade. The officer lowered his gun. "Clear a path," he said quietly. "Let them through." The security officers parted like a curtain. Vex walked between them, feeling their eyes on her back. The humans followed in silence, boots echoing on the bay floor. No one spoke, no one celebrated. They walked through corridors Vex knew by heart, past the mess hall where she'd shared meals with her crew, past the memorial wall where the names of the fallen were carved into metal, past the observation window where she'd watched stars and dreamed of a better galaxy. Everything was the same. Everything had changed. The council chamber doors loomed ahead, massive, carved with the symbols of every Alliance member species. Vex had entered these doors 100 times as a junior officer, as a commander, as a loyal servant of the Vethari people. She'd never walked through them as an enemy. Vance touched her arm. "You don't have to do this alone." "I know," Vex looked at the humans behind her, at their scarred faces and mismatched armor and terrible, beautiful defiance. "But I should." She pushed open the doors. The chamber was circular, built to hold hundreds. Today it held 7. The council sat in their elevated chairs, looking down at her like gods passing judgment on an ant. She recognized every face, every sneer, every carefully constructed expression of disappointment. High Counselor Emrak, a massive xylith with scales the color of dried blood, spoke first. "Commander Vexeles, you stand accused of treason, insubordination, and endangering Alliance assets. You are not authorized to be here. You are not authorized to speak. You will surrender immediately too." "I'm not surrendering." Emrak's eyes narrowed. "You have no authority to." "I have the only authority that matters." Vex stepped into the center of the chamber. Her voice echoed off the walls. "The authority of the 3,000 civilians who are alive because I disobeyed you. The authority of every soldier who's ever been told to die for a strategic advantage. The authority of the humans who pulled me out of the dark when you left me to freeze." She turned slowly, making eye contact with each council member. "I recorded a final log in that pod. I said goodbye to the stars, and then someone came for me. Not Alliance, not anyone you control, just someone who believed I deserved to live." Her voice hardened. "You want to charge me with treason? Fine, I am guilty. I am guilty of choosing life over orders. I am guilty of treating civilians like people instead of assets. I am guilty of believing that the Alliance was supposed to protect the weak, not feed them to the wolves." Emrak slammed his fist on his armrest. "You will be silent." "Or what, you'll kill me?" Vex laughed. It was a bitter sound. "You already tried. You launched me into deep space with a failing pod and no hope of rescue. The only reason I'm standing here is because someone else, someone you don't control, someone you can't intimidate, decided to be better than you." She pointed at the doors. "Behind me are 47 humans. They have no fleet, no allies, no strategic value. They're scavengers and exiles and refugees, and they came for me anyway. They risked their lives for a stranger because that's what decent beings do." Vex lowered her hand. "The galaxy is watching this transmission. Every species, every system, every person who's ever been told they don't matter. They're watching to see what the Alliance does when someone stands up and says enough." Silent. Then, from the back of the chamber, a single pair of hands began to clap. Vex turned. A human male stood in the gallery, one of hers, though she didn't know which. He'd slipped in during her speech. Now he was applauding. Others joined him, journalists, diplomats, low-level staff who'd snuck in to watch history unfold. The applause grew. The council members exchanged panicked glances. Emrak reached for something under his chair, a weapon probably, but before he could draw it, Vance appeared at Vex's side. Her hand rested on her own sidearm. "I wouldn't," Vance said softly. The clapping became cheering. Emrak's hand retreated. Vex turned back to the council. Her voice dropped to something almost gentle. "I'm not asking for my rank back. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for one thing." She spread her arms. "Change. The Alliance has forgotten what it means to protect. I'm here to remind you." She stepped back and nodded to Vance. The humans turned as one and walked out of the chamber. Behind them, the council sat in stunned silence. The applause followed Vex through the doors, down the corridor, all the way to the docking bay. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. On the Last Chance's bridge, Vex stood at the observation window and watched Alliance security scramble below. Ships were moving, communications were lighting up, the galaxy was waking up. You did it, Vance said. No, Vex shook her head. We did it. Vance smiled, so what now? Vex looked at the humans around her, at the patchwork walls and jury-rigged consoles and the beautiful, impossible ship that had saved her life. Now, she said, we prepare because the Council won't forget this. They'll come for us, for you, for every human who ever dared to stand against them. Vance's smile didn't waver. Let them come. The Last Chance lifted off. Behind them, Outpost Theta 9 grew smaller and smaller until it was just another light among the stars. Ahead, the void stretched endless and dark. And somewhere in that darkness, the Alliance was already moving. 3 months later, the Last Chance drifted in the debris field of a dead star. Vex had stopped counting the near misses. The Alliance had hunted them across 12 sectors, through asteroid belts and nebulae and the gravity shadows of gas giants. They'd outrun corvettes, outgunned frigates, and once, miraculously, outnegotiated a pirate lord who'd wanted to sell them for scrap. 47 humans had become 53, then 61, then 80. Every time the Alliance tried to silence Vex's message, someone heard it, someone believed it, someone left their post, their home, their species to find her. The Last Chance couldn't hold them all, so they'd stolen more ships, patched them together, created a fleet. An ugly fleet, a desperate fleet. A human fleet. The Council is convening an emergency session, Gregor reported from the comm station. His voice was tired but steady. They're calling it a vote on the human question. Vance snorted, the human question, like we're a math problem. What's the vote? Vex asked. Whether to declare all human vessels hostile, whether to authorize extreme measures. Gregor's jaw tightened. Extermination, Commander, they're talking about extermination. The bridge went silent, 80 humans and 1 Vethari, all staring at the same grim display. Vex closed her eyes. She'd known this moment would come. She dreaded it, planned for it, dreamed about it, and now that it was here, she felt something she hadn't expected. Calm. Captain Vance, she said, how long until we reach the Alliance capital? Vance raised an eyebrow. 17 hours if we push the engines. Why? Because we're not running anymore. Vex opened her eyes. The Council wants to vote on extermination. I say we give them something to vote on. She walked to the center of the bridge. Every eye followed her. For 3 months we've been running, hiding, surviving, and every day more people join us, not because they want to fight, because they want to believe that the galaxy can be better. Her voice rang through the ship. The Council is afraid. They should be, because we're not just a fleet anymore, we're a message. She turned to Vance. Set a course for the capital, full speed, and open a channel, broadcast on every frequency, every encryption, every language. Vance's smile was slow and dangerous. What do you want to say? Vex stepped up to the camera. Behind her, 80 humans stood at attention. Behind them, the fleet, a dozen ships, 100, 1,000, waited for her words. She spoke. This is Commander Vexeles of the human fleet. Yes, you heard that correctly. I am Vethari by birth, but human by choice. They saved me. They armed me. They taught me that survival is not enough, that we must also be worthy of survival. She paused. The Alliance Council is voting on whether to destroy us. Let me save you the trouble. You cannot destroy us. You cannot outrun us. You cannot silence us, because we are not a species or a faction or a flag. We are the people you left behind, the soldiers you abandoned, the civilians you sacrificed, the refugees you turned away. Her voice dropped. We are everywhere, we are watching, and we are coming. She cut the channel. The bridge erupted not in celebration, but in motion. Humans ran to their stations. Engines roared. The fleet surged forward as one, a swarm of patchwork vessels moving with a single purpose. 17 hours later, they dropped out of FTL above the Alliance capital. The defense fleet was waiting, 100 warships, 10,000 guns, enough firepower to turn a planet to ash. Vex stood on the bridge of the Last Chance and looked at the impossible odds. Any last words? Vance asked. Vex smiled. We've got nothing left to lose. The human fleet didn't attack. They simply waited. And the galaxy watched. The Alliance Council chamber was silent. High Counselor Emrak stared at the display. 80 ships, 80 broken ships, had somehow penetrated the capital's defenses. They weren't firing, weren't moving, just existing. Defiant and undeniable. Sir, an aide whispered, the human fleet is broadcasting the commander's original message. The one about the pod, the rescue. It's gone viral across every network. The people are responding. Emrak's scales crawled, responding how? The aide hesitated. They're demanding a vote, not on extermination, on accountability. The doors to the chamber burst open. Ambassador Kalel Vethari, elderly, respected, marched down the aisle with a data slate in her hand. Counselor Emrak, I have here a petition signed by 472,000 Alliance citizens. They are calling for a formal investigation into the abandonment of Commander Vexeles and the subsequent cover-up. Emrak's hand drifted toward his weapon. That's not possible. The vote hasn't. The vote doesn't matter. Kalel slapped the data slate onto the council table. The people have spoken. The galaxy has seen the truth. You launched a decorated officer into space to die because she saved children. And now the humans, the species you called vermin, have done more for Alliance citizens than you ever have. She lined close. Resign, all of you, or the fleet outside won't need to fire a single shot. The people will tear down this chamber with their bare hands. The council exchanged glances, panicked, desperate. Emrak's hand retreated from his weapon. I knew when he was beaten. The last chance received the news 3 hours later. Vex read the transmission twice, then a third time. Then she handed it to Vance and walked to the observation window. The Alliance capital hung below them, beautiful and terrible, and finally waking up. Well, Vance asked. Vex turned, her face was wet, she hadn't noticed. They resigned, all 7, emergency elections in 30 days, and there's a new position, ambassador to humanity. She laughed, a shaky, disbelieving sound. They want me to take it. Vance stepped beside her. Are you going too? Vex looked at the humans around her, at the patchwork walls and mismatched crew and beautiful, impossible ship that had saved her life. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly. The last chance is my home now. These people are my family. She touched the armor on her chest, the same armor she'd worn since that first day. But I'll visit. Someone has to teach the Alliance what it means to be human. Vance's smile was warm, real. You're not human. No, Vex turned back to the window, but I'm learning. Behind her, 80 humans went back to work. The fleet dispersed, carrying refugees and supplies and hope to the edges of Alliance space. And somewhere in the void, a pod drifted, empty, cold, forgotten. No one would ever be left alone again. Because the humans were watching. And they never forgot. The end.